All right, what's going on, guys? So today I'm going to be pondering the idea of, is Black Ops 6 rigged, or is it just the server code? Or it could be a combination of both, honestly. Um, so I'm going to throw up some like Black Ops 2 gameplay from like Plutonium I was playing earlier today. I'm 31 years old and I am playing on 300 ping, so do not expect the best gameplay. So just deal with the average quality gameplay. But I guess so when you think of like Black Ops 6 and these games that are potentially, rigging you in real time kind of thing, I think it's also important to understand like how these games are coded and the different kind of concepts behind multiplayer. Because I think a lot of times people think, or they don't even think about how these games are implemented, and they think everything is just real time, when in reality it's not real time. It's kind of like pseudo real time. So if you were to look at a game and how it's running, most likely these days it's going to be on like a server authoritative model, which means there's a server up here that is controlling the state of the game. And whatever the server says goes. It is the absolute authority when it comes to the game state. And when I say game state, I just mean like, what is everybody doing at this specific moment in time? Where are all the player locations? What are their rotations? Like, who's firing what gun? What's the ammo count? What's the current health of everybody? Et cetera, et cetera. So that's all the state that's being maintained by the server. So if we were to kind of go through and walk through, step by step, if you were making a game, you would have your clients, which are like your PlayStation 5, your Xbox, your computer, that are connecting to the server, and they're able to render a 3D world on their screen. So everybody's a client that's rendering a 3D world, and they're communicating with a server. So what happens is when you like press like your W key or something on your computer, on your keyboard, you are going to request to the server that you want to move forward by 1 unit, let's say, because you're pressing the W key, you're going forward. And then the server is going to check its state and see where you last were in game state. It's going to apply the transformation of, okay, move this guy forward 1, and then it's going to relay that information or broadcast that information out to all the clients that are connected. So that's going to result in, you as an entity moving 1 unit in the X-axis or Y-axis or whatever on your screen and on everybody else's screen. But the problem is, if you follow this model and that's all you implement, you're going to end up with a very like delay, laggy game, because it takes time for the clients to communicate with the servers. So a strategy around this that usually gets implemented will be client-side prediction, which is just saying like, okay, if the user presses W, yes, I'm going to relay that information to the server so that they can update their game state, but I'm just going to allow the client, or on the client, there's code that's running that's going to say, okay, progress him forward in the direction that he wants to go. Let him do that. So it feels smooth on your end, even if you're not in sync with what the server is actually, with what the actual game state is. So yeah, this is like a strategy they use to make it feel better, but this leads to a problem of like, what if your position is wrong from what the game state is, or what if something on your screen is wrong from what the game state is on the server? So if that happens, then server reconciliation will happen, where the server basically gets back to you, and on the client, you have to kind of reconcile the state and adjust accordingly. So that can lead to some like weird nuances where like you'll snap back, or other players will be snapping back and things like that, because your predicted state of the game is not in sync with what the actual state of the game is, if that makes sense. So when that happens, yeah, it can cause like jittery snapbacks and things like that. So another strategy that will be used is like, what's it called? Like entity interpolation, where instead of rendering like, so it'll get the game state from the server, like your client will get the game state from the server. It will look at the game state and it will like store the last 2 points, for example, of the players, like of the enemy's position. And instead of rendering them in real time, it's a slight delay, like milliseconds delay, to render them in a smooth manner and interpolate their positions based on the last 2 known states. And it's going to do that to prevent all this like jittery movement and things like that. So when you're seeing somebody on your screen, there's a good chance that you're actually seeing like a past instance of that person on your screen, like by like milliseconds. But so usually it's not, it's like not that bad. It's not bad feeling, because when you're shooting at somebody, it's like a millisecond kind of delay that's going on here. So it doesn't feel bad, only until certain circumstances happen where it does feel bad, kind of thing. I'm trying to think of another. So there's also an idea of like extrapolation, where you could have like an entity. So you could have like a client that's connected, like an enemy, who is, let's say they're running forward, and then suddenly their server, like their latency just spikes for whatever reason, and then they're not giving their updates to the server. So the server is just going to then predict that player's movement on your screen for you. Because otherwise, if they didn't do that, that player that was running, let's say in a straight line, would suddenly stop running. And it would be also very jittery, and it would look unnatural. So what they do to get around that is they will extrapolate and just they'll guess where the person was going based on their like velocity and things like that. And for the most part, it can end up being accurate. So therefore it won't cause any weird like impacts to you as a client that's, you know, looking at this information. But it can be weird if they suddenly take like a jarring movement in the opposite direction while they happen to be having like a latency spike. Then it can be some kind of weird stuff, but it hopefully will be smoothed out with the interpolation stuff that we were talking about before. Oh, man, like what else is there? There's like lag compensation. I got like a list here that I've gathered to re-jog my brain. There's also lag compensation. So that's when the server is going to like rewind the game state based on the most latent player, at least in like an interaction. So if you have like two guys in a gunfight, the player with the higher latency will probably have the advantage, or it'll feel they do this to make it feel fair for everybody. Just to have so everybody has an overall good experience. Because if they didn't do this, the player with the higher latency would always be at a disadvantage. And when they're shooting at something, they might be shooting at something that they see on their screen, and it's there present in the moment, but it's actually not when the game state gets back from the server. So therefore, like someone thinks they'll get a kill, but then they don't get a kill, kind of thing. Where was I going with this? Oh yeah, so the server will rewind game state based on the like more latent players. Like the more latent player's time, and then it will calculate like, did that player see what he saw on his screen, and if he did, then like allow the player to like confirm the hit. Let's say he's like let's say there's a player shooting at somebody, then allow him to register that hit because he did see it on his screen, even if it's not technically a total accurate representation of what happened in real game state, if that makes sense. So there's some of that goes on, and then that can lead to those scenarios where you're like running behind a wall and then suddenly you die on your end. It's because there's a higher latency player probably shooting at you, and then on his screen you were not behind the wall, but on your screen you were behind the wall. So the server is just going to award him that kill, kind of thing. And I know it sucks. It is one of those things that sucks, but it's like a trade-off where it generally feels good for everybody, except in those kind of, you know, specific scenarios. I'm trying to think if there's any other. Oh yeah, there's also like, so like instead of the server sending the entire state of the game out, that can like chew up bandwidth as the state gets more complex, and as like more players are connecting and stuff like that. So often what they'll do is they'll send out the delta of the state, which means just send out the relevant information of state that has changed. So that can help improve like performance, but sometimes it can cause some weird nuances, I guess, where, you know, if state got modified and it didn't go out properly, and then there happened to be latency, it can cause like some weird effects where suddenly the state finally does come in, but it's delayed, and it can also lead to that like jittery kind of movement stuff. But once again, they're not able to, like games, at least the higher end games, are not able to send out all of the state at once because it would just be too much, and it would just cause too much, like there's just not enough bandwidth, kind of thing. So with all that being said, are they rigging the games or not? I mean, so, okay, like multiplayer games are very complex to implement. That's definitely true. And some of the scenarios where you feel like you should have gotten a kill, or you feel you shouldn't have died, kind of thing, those could all just be results of netcode. That's very, very possible. Like where the game is just correcting itself, or it's poorly implemented netcode. Very, very possible. But I also think, I mean, you can just track all of these other things in this game state loop that we talked about, right? Because it's a server authoritative model. It's taking in game state and it's broadcasting that out to everybody. So like regardless of all of these other nuances of netcode, it's just a matter of tracking the state in the game state. So if you wanted to track things like kill death ratio at any given moment for all of the players, it's very doable. Like you're already tracking rotation and position and, you know, health count, all that kind of stuff. So like, why not just track the KDAs? You could also track things like interactions between specific players. Like I could look at how many times, like you as a player or as a player in the game, like how many times have you won a gunfight against this other player? And then if it's like a 75% conversion kind of thing, then I could reduce your bullets by 25% or something. You know, that's a very possible calculation that could happen, or a very possible like nerf that could happen. I mean, you could do stuff like preloading data of how long has this player been playing, like what's their win rate for the past week, how frequently are they logging in, what skins do they have. Like these are all things that could just be preloaded in, and that's not even real-time data. That's just preloaded data that's just going to affect maybe some equation that they have in the state loop, to where it's like, oh, they have, I don't know, X amount of skins, or they don't have X amount of skins, then nerf their bullet damage by 20% in these specific scenarios where they're going up against somebody that does have the camo kind of thing. Like that's all very, very trackable. It's very, very doable. So I'm not saying it's in the game, and I'm not saying it's not in the game. I like to remain 50% on things, usually like 50-50. But I'm just here to say that, yeah, it's very possible. I don't understand why people would just be total naysayers. But at the same time, there's a degree of like, just because something's possible doesn't mean it happened, right? So you kind of have to, you know, think for yourself and come to a conclusion. That goes for anything in life. Yeah, so I mean, yeah, I think it's very possible. That's kind of my 2 cents on it. And hopefully that helps clarify some stuff. I don't know, just kind of rambling and seeing where I go with it. I don't claim to be the smartest guy in the room or an expert on all of this stuff. It's just stuff that I'm interested in. You know, I'm implementing some of these strategies in my game currently that I'm trying to make. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So, peace.